I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Numbers, chapter 8, and let's focus on verses 23 through 26. The Lord spoke to Moses in regard to the Levites from 25 years old or more. A man enters the service and the work at the tent of meeting. But at 50 years old, he is to retire from his service and the work and no longer serve. He may assist his brothers to fulfill responsibilities at the tent of meeting, but he must do no work. This is how you are to deal with the Levites regarding their duties. Numbers 8, verses 23 through 26. Now I have friends who are real estate investors, and presently they are building these retirement communities for young, or at least young at heart, retirees. And part of the secular American dream is to work hard, be diligent with your money, and then spend your retirement years playing, more or less. But I don't see such a lifestyle even suggested in the Bible. Two of my favorite friends working on church staffs over the years were over 80 years old. One was a World War II veteran, and the other was a former industrial engineer. And if you ask them about retirement, they'll tell you that followers of Jesus never retire from serving the Lord. Put simply, when it came time for these men to retire from their occupations, they began working full-time on their preoccupations, namely sharing the gospel. So track with me for a moment. Almost every church that I've attended has been or was soon to become a mega church. And I've visited smaller congregations, but I seldom find the synergy in the smaller churches. And I tend to be attracted with excitement and opportunity that's present in a thriving congregation. Maybe I'm just a ministry adrenaline junkie. And then growing churches seem to have these dynamic leaders. And that being the case, every organization must face the eventual exit of its founder or of its dynamic leader. Now, our culture loves to follow personas, right? We like the cult of personality. And we're naturally drawn to celebrity. So whenever you have a charismatic persona who's leading a congregation and they're almost a celebrity, even in their hometown or maybe even nationally, internationally, whenever they leave that congregation, it can often lead to that congregation's collapse. Why is that? Well, because charisma, while you kind of need it and you sort of rely on it in order to build a church, that is a charismatic leader, but charisma, if left in place too long, can kill vision, right? When a church relies too much on their leader to save the day instead of relying on the Lord, then they generally spend inadequate amounts of time building up young leaders to take the place of the pulpit. Seldom do young leaders ever get a chance to preach hardly at all, because who wants to hear them when they could hear the rock star? And then when the leader's gone and nobody is there in reserve, well, now you got problems. So Israel needed a Joshua in order to follow Moses. Every Elijah needs to have an Elisha in his wings. And any church or ministry needs to consider the reality that if the Lord tarries, their ministry will need a successor as well. And God saw this potential for leadership implosion in Israel. The people would not be raised up, and so he set up guidelines to perpetuate leaders and managers throughout the generations. The leadership magnate John Maxwell says, success is defined by the successor. And what he means is that it's not enough to build a big organization around your charisma. More importantly, do you build organizations that would thrive in your absence? And that means your organization must be founded on and supported by values and principles rather than the charisma of a leader. Jesus said, go and make disciples. And perhaps that element of discipleship is the heart of the Levitical mandatory retirement policy. Every Levite got his day in the sun, and then he was commanded to step off the pitcher's mound and spend the rest of his life preparing and enabling the next generation. That's exactly why Groundworks Ministries exist, because every believer should know the Bible comprehensively from the beginning to the end, and they should be able to teach it not only to children, but to talk about it to anyone that they meet. And maybe even they would be called to step up and to preach in a pulpit were their pastor to no longer be there. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Check us out at groundworksministries.com.